What's up, YouTube? I am the Villain Nerd, and today I want to talk about Aquaman 2. I just saw this movie, and I'm excited to talk about it. I know probably a lot of people haven't seen this movie and don't really care, but I want to talk about it, so I'm going to. Just a fair warning, there will be heavy spoilers for this movie throughout my review, so just be prepared for that, but I want to talk about it, and I look forward to doing that, so yeah, just spoiler warning, obligatory. Yep. Now, to start off this review, I want to preface it that this is the first movie I have seen in like 5 or 6 months. And that went a long way into making me like it so much because I did really like Aquaman 2. It's not a perfect movie. I'm going to talk critically about it in a second. But first, I just want to acknowledge that like I really did enjoy it. And a big reason is because I haven't seen a movie in theaters in just so long. And having that theater experience again was just so fun, especially with a movie like this. And this is nothing new. We all know that expectations affect our movie going experience. I've gone into a lot of movies recently in the last couple of years expecting to be disappointed, and when the movie disappointed me and didn't live up to the expectations or the hype or whatever, I was just even more disappointed, which you would think expecting to be disappointed you'd be more disappointed, you'd be less disappointed, but I was more disappointed. Anywho, doesn't matter. The point is that happens. And honestly, if I'd seen this movie like 5, 6 months ago, I probably would have been very disappointed. But as it stands, I actually watched it, after 6 months of a movie going drought. And so I liked it a lot even more. And the thing is behind Aquaman 2 is that it was a fun popcorn action flick. And that's a term that my friend uses that I really like. And it's a term that could be applied to Transformers or the MonsterVerse movies like Godzilla or Godzilla vs. Kong or like Speed Racer. Movies with, not the strongest plots, but they're good movies because you get to see stuff you've never seen before. You get to see cool things. And Aquaman 2 was no exception. I got to see octopus mechs, like these steampunk mechs with 8 arms, swimming through the ocean, fighting, shooting lasers, being awesome. I got to see a steampunk hammerhead submarine with a sonic cannon with a comically large disc. It was awesome. It was so fun. I got to see Atlantis again with all the bright neon lights and the hydro cannons and the cool armor and stuff. And I got to see Black Manta with a glowing green trident fight Aquaman with his gold trident. It was a blast. Was it a perfect movie? No. Its plot had issues, and I'll talk about the issues I had with it in a second. But ultimately, this movie delivered a spectacle, and that's what I love about it. That's what I appreciate. And it's something that the first movie did as well. But personally, I think the first movie had a better plot and stronger villain, among a lot of other things going for it. So there's that. But I'll talk about the comparisons between this movie and the second movie as I talk a little bit more critically, which I'll do here in a second. But I do think it's very fair to compare this to the first movie because the first movie was so successful. It's actually the most successful DC movie of the DCEU. A lot of people liked it, myself included, and I want to do a review of the first movie here in a bit, but I'm talking about the second movie first because, well, I've just seen it most recently, so Anywho, the second movie has its problems, and that is what we're going to get to right now. So we're moving out of the, rose-colored glasses of me just liking this movie because it's the first movie I've seen in months, and moving into the more critical, all right, if I think about this with my little movie critic hat, what am I thinking? What am I seeing? Okay, so I have 3 big issues with this movie. The first is that the villain was not very strong, and this is the most problematic because it's just so unfortunate this movie didn't have a strong villain anywhere. It tried to have Black Manta, but he was more of a puppet for the main villain, Necris. There was a little bit of Orm there, but Orm was never a villain in this movie. He was always on a path to redemption and to, being seen in a sympathetic light. So there's that. And, then there's Necris, the big bad evil guy, the leader of the Lost Kingdom, who's undead and still living, just frozen. And he's not really that compelling because he literally is not a character. He's just a force. He is a malevolent evil lurking in the background, and his scenes in question last less than a minute, all said. So, yeah, there's that. And it's really sad because the first movie Black Manta was such a compelling villain. I liked him even more than Orm, and he was just a side character. And every scene that he had on screen, he stole the show. He was so cool, even with his big dorky helmet. His laser beams were awesome. His sword fighting was intense. He was just a really cool villain, and I was so stoked that this movie he was going to be the main villain. And then we didn't get that version of him. We got this, green-eyed glazed man who didn't have that same drive to kill and hunt down Aquaman. Yes, he still did a lot of that stuff, but it was lacking that oomph, it was lacking that pressure, and that's just so unfortunate because Black Manta was so cool. I wish they just took Necros out of it completely and they just had Black Manta versus Aquaman. That would have been so much better, but I digress. I'll talk about that in another video. Now, the second big thing that I will say that is against this movie for me was that the fight scenes were less entertaining. And I know this is like a small thing. Not everyone likes fights or battle, but this is an action movie, all right? There are supposed to be some really fun action scenes. And while I did like the octopod infiltration, seeing the mechs interact, and I did like the end battle where Aquaman and Black Manta had a Trident versus Trident battle, the rest of the action scenes of this movie were lacking, and that's really unfortunate. And again, comparing it to the first movie had a ton of standout action scenes. Even the very first action scene where his mom, Atlanta, is attacking the Atlanteans who have come to take her back to Atlantis was fun and entertaining and a lot better than some of the action scenes in this movie. And then you had standout things like the championship gladiator battle in Atlantis where Aquaman loses to Orm the first time. Or you have Black Manta versus Aquaman and the Atlantean troops versus Mera in Italy, which was a really fun battle and one of my favorites of all time across all movies. It was just so fun. Or you have the end battle where Aquaman wins back the throne and brings in the Karathon, and there's this giant, large-scale battle that looks epic and awesome and wonderful. And I loved that about the first movie, but this movie was just lacking all of that. There was no grand battle. There was no really epic, fun fight above land and above ground. There was a really cool Trident fight. I will wholeheartedly admit I absolutely loved it, seeing Black Manta and Aquaman go toe-to-toe with their two Tridents. That was dope. But outside of that, it just was missing. And I was waiting for it all movie, and I was so sad that it took till the end to get that. And that's just unfortunate. And that's something that I really think held this movie back compared to the first movie. And the last big problem I had with this movie was the messaging. It was very much in your face, over the top. You couldn't really watch the movie without seeing it just, coming at you, kind of a thing. And if you're wondering, the messaging is global warming, it needs to be prevented. And I'm fine with that message. I don't have a problem with wanting to prevent global warming and stuff and trying to be better and be more, protect the planet and be more environmentally conscious. But when you have the main villain causing global warming, the paragon of evil being just this causing global warming because he doesn't care, and then you have our hero, the king of Atlantis, being like, yo, we've got to stop global warming and, we've got to save the environment. And it's just so over the top, so in your face. It really pulls me out of the movie. And that's what I don't like. It's not the message. It's how the message is presented. And that's what's frustrating. Now, I will say the main theme of this movie was not that. They focused on the buddy cop stuff between, not buddy cop, the buddy adventure stuff between Arthur and his brother Orm, and they focused on strengthening that relationship and giving Orm a redemption, and I thought they did that pretty well. It's not the best redemption arc I've seen. I mean, for crying out loud, I've watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, and that has the single best redemption arc I have ever seen, period. But it still was a good redemption. It was fine. It worked for me, and it made the final scene of the movie work for me, where, Orm gives up the trident to let Aquaman kill and stop Necros. So totally fine by me. But that being said, it was still frustrating that the second biggest theme outside of brotherly love was global warming bad. And I just, anyway, it bothers me that was such a big focus because it pulls me out of the movie. I want to just get lost in this fantasy world. I watch movies for escapism, and when you bring in that real world aspect, it's just frustrating to me. That's my opinion. I know not everyone would take issues with that, but that's how I feel. Anyhow, moving on. So, what did I like about this movie? Well, as I said just a little bit ago, I really liked the brotherly love section. I loved seeing Arthur, bond and grow closer with Orm. I loved Orm's redemption. Again, not the best, but it was still good and super fun. That was good. That was solid. I also loved Black Manta with a trident. When he put on the helmet and had the trident, it just felt right. Even though he used swords in the last movie, he was still really, really cool with his trident and his helmet. So that was dope. I also really liked Dr. Shin. He was absolutely fantastic and super fun to see him. It's a classic trope. The scientist that doesn't really want to go along with the fanatical ideas, but does because their research, etc., etc. But I liked seeing him slowly change and not necessarily change, but slowly turn away from the madman aspect of Black Manta. So that was fun. The times that we do get pure Black Manta are great, specifically the beginning of the movie and the end, when he's actually, Black Manta and he hates Aquaman and he's driven and he doesn't have Necros, clouding over his eyes and telling him mysterious things to say and all that stuff. But, it is what it is. And of course, the other big thing that I liked, which I talked about at the very beginning, is just the spectacle. This movie had a lot of fun scenes that I just will never see anywhere else. And I compare it a lot to the Blue Beetle movie that I just watched a few days ago at home. I streamed it. First time I watched it. And that was a movie where, most of the stuff I've seen in there, I can see in another movie. It mostly took place in an urban environment or, a little suburb and stuff. And that's fine. It worked for that film. That's the aesthetic they were going for. But ultimately, that's not a popcorn action flick. This, Aquaman 2, is a popcorn action flick. I don't get to see many movies that take place heavily underwater. I don't get to see many movies that I get to see a CGI octopus sneak into a prison and fight creepy centipede desert creatures. That's dope. That's awesome. That is worth going to the movies for, even if it's a movie that has a really poor plot, a weak villain, and not very strong fight scenes, etc., etc. So that's how I feel about Aquaman 2. I know I didn't do my typical character plot setting format, but those hit the major points that I liked about this movie. That's how I feel. So, catch you later when I do an Aquaman 1 movie review.